On today's Ask Zach, we're going to talk about the restoration and upgrades that I did to my 1981 herringbone Martin D-28. Well, hello friends, and welcome to Ask Zach. Today we're going to look at this guitar. This is the guitar I've owned the longest. It's a 1981 herringbone D-28. I bought it in 1993, but yeah, I've owned it for I guess close to 32 years. And it's a fantastic guitar, and it needed a bunch of work. And then I kind of went above and beyond, doing just the necessary work and also doing some upgrades to it, some things that I'd wanted to do for a very long time, including, beyond just the structural stuff, also doing like a tortoiseshell pickguard to replace the original black one, and like Waverly machine heads, and yeah, just to make it look more like a real herringbone. Of course, in this case, it would have been like a mid-40s because it has dot inlays. But yeah, so we're gonna go in depth on everything that I did to this here guitar to make it killer again, and kind of a dream acoustic at this point, which is really nice to have an old guitar that's been part of your life for all this time, over half of it, most of my life, and yeah, so we're gonna dive in. But first, a little pause for the cause. I just need to thank everyone that has ever given me a thumbs up or bought a t-shirt or a coffee mug or commented or just said anything nice. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone that supports me through Patreon, which is a fantastic way of supporting the show. And if you want to find out about that, you can go look down in the description and there's a link. Let's dive in. Of course, Martin started making a herringbone reissue in the mid-70s. It wasn't really true in that it had, of course it had dot inlays, a black pickguard, and die-cast shallow machine heads, and probably some other features that were wrong, but they started making it then. And the way I got introduced to this guitar was in 1993. That was the year I transferred into Belmont University here in Nashville, Tennessee. And of course, I'd been living in Kingsville, Texas. And right before moving to Nashville, I knew I needed a good acoustic guitar. So I went to Clausen's Music, my favorite shop, and I talked with Bob Clausen, and he sold me a Martin D-35. And it was beautiful, and I loved it. And I moved to Nashville with it. And when December rolled around, of course, I needed to come home for Christmas break, and came down, and of course I had to go to Clausen's Music and say hi to Bob and Bubba and all the clan down there. And they had a bunch of different guitars on the wall, which of course happens with any store. There's always revolving inventory. And I went around and was checking out everything, and I saw this Martin on the wall, and I just thought, oh, that'd be fun to check out. So I pulled it down off the wall, and it just smoked that D-35. Now at that point, that D-35 was brand new, and this guitar was 12 years old at that point and had been played. And also it had scalloped bracings versus the unscalloped bracings that were on a D-35. And, and sometimes one guitar is just better than another. So I knew I had to have this guitar. I didn't have much money, but I knew that I had a bunch of stuff at home that I couldn't take up to college with me that my parents wanted me to get rid of. So I thought, well, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. And so I emptied out my closet at our house, and it had a Roland U20 keyboard, an old sequencer that had a floppy drive on it, a keyboard stand, and I had a big PV bass amp. I can't remember if it was a TKO or a TNT, but it was, had like a 15-inch speaker in it, probably a Black Widow or something. And so I traded all those things for this guitar, and plus some cash, because it was still not an inexpensive guitar at that point. And I picked it up and just fell in love with it. I ended up trading off the D35 to get a good Strat. But I played this and played it and played it and played it and just loved it. It's been kind of my main acoustic for many, many years. The only real modifications I did was it came with a Martin thin line pickup on it that I assume was factory installed back in '81. And it was a passive pickup. It was an undersaddle pickup, but it just didn't sound very good. It was really thin, and it was hard to get a good sound of it. And in the mid-90s, I got a gig playing with an act that had been on Warner Brothers Records, and they were called the McCarter Sisters. Not the Carter Sisters, the McCarter Sisters. And it was an acoustic guitar kind of thing. So I took this guitar and I took it to a shop there in Nashville, and I had a Fishman Matrix put in it, which of course had a preamp, but still an undersaddle, pickup. So I had that installed and of course played the gig, and it was a lot of fun. Side note on the gig was the bass player on the gig was a guy named Darren Vincent that of course would later on play with Ricky Skaggs and then be part of Daly and Vincent. And he's a magnificent singer, musician, and he was just a great hang and just a lot of fun to be in a van with for a couple of days. So then, as the years went on, I just kept playing this guitar and using it. And I can remember Brad using this once on a soundtrack that he was doing where it was kind of a last minute thing, and he just said, bring what you have at the house and bring an acoustic. And so I brought this one, and so he used it. I remember using this on the Opry. I remember using this when JD Simo was trying to get a country record deal, and JD was wearing a Manuel suit with rhinestones. It was maroon, and he made us, the whole band wore all black, so I was wearing a black suit, and he gave us purple neckerchiefs to wear that we had to wear along the side of the neck with and it was crazy. But just tons and tons of great memories of playing this guitar. Well, fast forward to about 2015, 2016, and Waterloo came out with these really great guitars. Of course, they're made by Collings, and they're kind of like little LOO type instruments. And JD Simo had one of those, and I ended up picking up a WL14, a black one. And I loved it so much that I basically put this guitar in the case, and it didn't come out for years. So finally, I think I did an episode with this guitar just talking about it a year or two ago. And then recently, I got a call to do an acoustic duo gig with my buddy Austin Skinner, downtown Nashville. And he called me up, and I said, sure. And I was about to grab the Waterloo, and all of a sudden something inside me said, get your old Martin out. You haven't played that thing in years. And so I got it out. Of course, I had to put a fresh battery in it and had to put fresh strings on it. And it just sounded great, and I loved playing it. And it sounded great on the gig, but it was kind of like, it also showcased that it had some problems. It needed, it had some fret issues. The frets were really low and uneven. There were some potential nut and saddle issues and such. And it had some, you could tell it was a little sick and needed a little help. So I just decided, you know what? I've had this guitar for 31 years, 32 years. I just need to take it down to Glazer Instruments, and I need to have it really looked over. So I went down to Glazer Instruments, had Adam Chowning look at it, and he said, well, your bridge plate is chewed up, so that needs to be repaired. So that's, of course, on the underside of the top. He said, you're going to need a new saddle, you're going to need a new nut, he said, you're probably going to need new frets. And of course, I talked to the guy that does the plec, and they looked at it, and he said, yeah, you could get a dress out of it, but you're going to be happier if you just go ahead and do a refret. So I decided, okay, let's do that. Well, then, you know, with doing that amount of work, and I knew it wasn't going to be cheap, I thought, you know, let's just go whole hog and let's do the things that I've dreamed about doing for a while on this guitar. So one, I wanted to get that Fishman Matrix pickup out of there because I hated having a battery pickup in a guitar. And that's just a personal thing. I just don't like batteries in guitars. I'd rather have, like on an acoustic guitar, I'd rather have an active preamp or something of that sort. And I really like the K&K pickup. So I said, all right, I want to get the Fishman pickup out of there and I want to put a K&K pickup. And Adam said, that's a good idea because that undersaddle pickup, you know, that the Fishman is, well, it's underneath the saddle. And so if you take it out and go to the K&K, then you get direct contact between the saddle and the bridge. And he said, it's going to improve the sound. I said, great, let's do that. Also, of course, you lose the battery and you lose a little weight, you know, from the losing the preamp and all that jazz. So then I said, okay, here's another thing I want to do. I want to change the black pickguard. The black pickguard just looks wrong to me because a herringbone would have had a tortoiseshell pickguard. And he said, great, I've got your guy. Holter pickguards. And so he hooked me up with him, and he had a bunch of different options, different colors of rosewood, you know, tortoiseshell, lighter or darker. He could do tiger stripe, all sorts of things. And so I went with a dark tortoiseshell that was kind of appropriate for that era because I kind of decided that I wanted this guitar to look like a mid-40s. Because it has dot inlays instead of snowflakes, you know, it's never going to look like a 37. So I thought, well, let's make it look like a mid-40s herringbone, because there were herringbones that had dot inlays just in that time period. So we went with that, and I love it. And I'm going to put a link in the description because this is just a gorgeous guard and a huge improvement over the old black one. The other thing I'd always wanted to do was I always wanted to get those big, heavy die-cast Schaller machine heads off of here and put Waverlys on. Because Waverlys look right. You know, they're open gear. They're just smaller. They weigh less. You have less mass to the headstock, and it's going to get a little bit more of an old school sound versus a more modern sound by having a lot of mass at the headstock. And then an added benefit of that was Adam told me that also you get better break angle because the Waverly machine heads are shorter, and therefore you get a better break angle, meaning they come back like they should instead of coming out and going higher with the Schaller machine heads. So I went with that. Of course, they also replaced the nut. Again, you know, new frets and everything, and it just ended up making it a ridiculously greater guitar, you know, a much greater instrument than it was before. I just kind of fell in love with the guitar again. It's just, it looks amazing. It sounds amazing. All these modifications really added up to be a big change in the tone, which makes sense because, you know, when the frets are worn out, well, things aren't going to fret true and it's not going to sound like it should. And so when you have good frets that are crowned well by old Maximilian down there at Glazer's shop, well, it's going to sound better. It's going to sound better when you have a good, you know, saddle, a good bone saddle that's been shaped well and slotted well. Same thing with a nut. You know, and then of course by fixing the bridge plate and then removing the weight of those Schaller machine heads and, you know, getting better break angle. It all added up to a better sounding instrument that just, again, made me fall in love with this thing again. It just sounds so great. And of course I've put a few clips of me playing it at the beginning and the end of the video, but it's just everything's true, intonates great, rings so well, great sustain. Yeah, so maybe this is something, you know, you think about doing to your you know, 70s or 80s Martin. You know, you could do some fun upgrades, like you know, because the Waverly machine heads, you have to put conversion bushings on here. But back here, there was nothing filled in. It covered up the shallower holes and such. And then of course another really fun upgrade is this this Holter pickguard, which I highly recommend. He was great to deal with and has beautiful guards. So yeah, and you know what? Not every guitar might be worthy of this level of work, but maybe if you have an old favorite that needs it, maybe it's time to get some heavy duty work done on it and really bring an old friend back to life. So I need to thank Glaser Instruments, Adam Chowning, who of course did all the work on the bridge and the saddle and the nut, to Max for putting in the frets and for them putting in the K&K and everything, and thanks to Holter pickguards, fantastic. I'll put a link in the description to them. All right, guys. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.